thank you, Henry.
The fellow who helps his fellow man.
His fellow man. Henry, let's drink to Henry. He gets the job done the best he can. Yeah!
Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has over 5 hours of cinematic cutscenes. That's longer than 2 movies. Those 5 hours were built from 150 individual scenes, around 80 actors, and nearly 5 years of production. And there's the insane part. Every castle, every battlefield, every emotional medieval breakdown was filmed in an empty 6x8 meter room. No armor, no horses, no castles. Just actors in skin-tight suits, pretending. So how do you turn that into one of the most immersive RPGs ever made? Well, let's go inside the making of KCD2's cutscenes. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is, if anything, massive. Depending on how deep you go, you're looking at 70 to 120 hours of gameplay. And that's without DLC. But 5 of these hours are pure cinematics. And to put that into perspective, 1 hour of finished cutscenes takes roughly 1 year to produce. Planning, motion capture, animation, lighting, music, post-production. 5 hours, 5 years. This isn't your typical throw some dialogue into the engine and call it a day. This is borderline medieval cinema. However, every cutscene started at a meeting table. The animation team, led by the director Petr Pekar, would sit down and break everything apart. Some artists brought hand-drawn storyboards, beautiful, detailed, almost theatrical. Others built rough versions directly in the game engine, using basic character blocks, temporary lighting, reference music. It looked rough, but it gave them something essential, the scene's general mood. And only once everyone agreed on tone, pacing and intention did they move to motion capture, which is where things get small. The motion capture studio is basically just an empty room, about 6x8 meters. Yes, that's the only correct measurement for us Europeans. But it's about 20 by 26 feet for the Americans out there. No set pieces, no costumes, no medieval props. Actors wear tight suits covered in tracking markers. And if a scene requires an object to be interacted with, you might ask. A door, a bed, a throne to sit on. Well, everything is simulated using adjustable constructions. The actors have to imagine everything. They are told, you're in a castle hall now. There's an army in front of you. There's fire everywhere. Or someone you love just died. But in reality, it's drywall and cables. If someone needs to walk more than 8 meters, the movement is split into segments, with specific lines of dialogue assisted to each one. If a scene needs more than 6 to 8 actors, it has to be captured in pieces and stitched together later. Large battle scenes basically become digital Frankenstein projects.
Victor!
But there's a benefit. Unlike when shooting a movie outdoors, there are no weather delays, no sunlight problems, and no wind ruining the audio. It's just pure performance. And speaking of movies, you might think making a game cutscene is like filming a movie. Well, you couldn't be more wrong. Movies shoot small fragments, like close-ups, reverse shots. They are basically tiny pieces edited together. In KCD2, scenes are often performed in one continuous run. It's actually more like theater than a movie. But that's also not entirely correct. Camera angles are added later, so the actors need to know exactly when the quote-unquote camera will be close on their face, even though the camera doesn't exist yet. So the performance has to feel natural overall, but still hit invisible story beats. It's half theater and half digital post-production surgery. Warhorse worked with 4 categories of performers. First, there was the main British cast, the primary voiced characters. Then Czech stand-ins, used for scenes without dialogue, so the main actors didn't have to fly in just to sit silently at a table. Third, stunt performance for combat, falls, and dangerous choreography. And finally, the rarest category, the developers themselves. Sometimes it's simply faster to put on the mocap suit and act it out than explain it for 20 minutes to someone else. Yeah, so, some random medieval peasant you saw on the road might have coded your questline. Now let's be honest, there is no KCD without Henry and Hans. Tom McKay and Luke Dale have lived inside these characters for years. And according to the directors, they barely need direction anymore.
Like a spoilt brat. How dare you speak?
They walked into the studio and they are Henry and Hans. They improvise, they react naturally, they suggest new ideas on the fly. Out of roughly 80 days of pure motion capture, Tom McKay spent about 20 days as Henry and Luke Dale around 10 to 15 as Hans. That's it. And yet, their presence carries the entire experience. That's efficiency. But not everything went according to plan, far from it.
Matilda!
Fucking hell!
In fact, some of the best moments in the game were accidents, the result of improvisation or simply someone stumbling over a box. So for example, Hans Capen's backwards roll at the beginning was not scripted. And some fight scenes were completely improvised by stunt performers because there simply wasn't enough time to fully choreograph everything. For example, the major story-relevant group fight in which Musa saves Henry from being killed by Eric was completely reshaped in post-production. What started as a chaotic, improvised long take became a series of tight escalating shots. The final result was better than the original plan. Sometimes constraints create better art. Sometimes someone just trips over a box, and both are valid. Human actors are one thing, but this is something completely different. You can't have medieval Bohemia without horses, but you also can't fit a horse into a motion capture studio, or an elevator, or probably the insurance policy. So what Warhorse used were chairs. Actors sat on chairs, bounced slightly and pretended to ride. In post-production, their upper body was attached to animated horse movements. And if they needed to look around while riding, crew members literally walked around the studio pointing at imaginary landmarks. So for example, for the final massive army scene, this system was crucial.
Lords who bent their knees to Sigismund. And even after he fled our country, they carried on plundering our lands!
They did upgrade from the first game though. This time, they at least bought a real saddle. Luxury. Now Warhorse also actually tested motion capture with a real dog. The result was, well, unusable. So in the end, most dogs in the games are played by the developers themselves, which means every time you pet a dog in KCD2, you're technically thanking someone from the animation department. KCD2's characteristic orchestral score, for which they weren't even nominated at the Game Awards, wasn't added at the end. Composer Jan Walter was involved from the storyboard phase. Before filming even started, he was told if a scene is tragic, romantic, aggressive or celebratory. He drafted music based on tone alone. Then, once the scene was finalized, he composed precisely to the scene's length and emotional beats. Still, nothing was final until approved by both Dan Vavra and Petr Pekař.
That is fucking impressive.
Music in this game isn't decoration. It was engineered into the DNA of each scene. After motion capture, the raw data goes to animators. And this is where reality gets adjusted. Height differences get corrected, facial expressions refined, and sometimes entirely replaced. In the first game, facial animation was largely text-driven, which means the animators told the engine, "This character looks angry," or "This character looks happy." Now they use in-house developed performance capture cameras to record facial expressions directly, but even that isn't perfect. Animators still have to polish everything, because immersion dies in the details, and sometimes the magic isn't about adding detail, it's about fixing something that would have completely broken immersion. Spoiler alert. Take the moment where Henry finally kills his nemesis, Marquard von Aulitz. One of the most emotionally charged scenes in the entire game. The actor playing Marquardt was nearly 2 meters tall, and Tom McKay is, well, not. In the raw motion capture, when Henry grabs him, the arms were literally floating mid-air. The hug of death looked like Marquardt was trying to strangle an invisible ghost. So animators had to precisely adjust height, posture and arm positioning, frame by frame, to make it believable. They even asked if the actors could reenact the same scene using a different position. The answer was no. The scene was perfect. Deal with it. So they did. Because immersion could die in moments like this, and KCD lives or dies by immersion. In the end, not every cutscene survived. At least one fully finished scene was removed because its quest got cut. Others were partially completed but never made it into the final game. 5 years of work and still creative casualties. That's game development, I guess. So in total, 5 years, 5 hours of cutscenes, 150 scenes, 80 actors, and 1 empty room. Warhorse intentionally chose to make the scenes slower, longer, more deliberate than strictly necessary. Because Kingdom Come isn't about spectacle, it's about immersion. About letting moments breathe. And if this is what 5 hours required, imagine what comes next.